the short version is I fell asleep driving, crashed into a tree, and then I was out of my body in the white light looking down at the car, very smashed, that I was surprised anything could have survived in that. And my body was leaning against the tree, sitting on the ground, leaning against the tree like this. There was a police officer crouching over me. I was in the white light. There was a big circle of a different shade of white light behind me, another shade of white light. There was a being behind me that just was like a white person, but just white light, and then even another shade of white light radiating off of that. Something I didn't realize for years, someone said, oh, you must have been able to see behind you, because I was definitely looking this way. I just knew what was behind me. It wasn't like I saw it in my mind's eye. It was almost, I guess my vision was almost like 3D, where I could see everywhere. And that is what the experience was like. It was like being part of everything, knowing everything, with this wonderful feeling of love. And just, even when I think about it, something in me just starts to feel warm in my heart, that it was, sometimes when, like, I look at my daughter, sometimes that's close to that, like, that feeling. And so then the being behind me said, you have to go back. Your father wants you to stay. I knew right away that the father he was talking about was God. And so I went back in my body and came to 3 days later. How I describe it really came later, because it was, it's not now. Like now, near-death experiences are a thing. I didn't ever even hear that word back then. And then I met a teacher, a Sufi sheikh in the Mevlevi dervishes, who talked to me about Mary's love of God. And I thought, that was what I felt. Then he talked about the ocean of divine love and benevolence. That was the white light around me. And then he started to talk about Jesus, and I was like, that being behind me was Jesus. And I knew that 100% inside of me, in an energetic way, a feeling kind of, that tingly feeling you get when something just really hits home, and knowing, and those are the words that definitely describe what happened. What happened to me after that, probably the biggest thing that happened was these spiritual coincidences just started happening so much, and they still do. All of a sudden I meet people, and, also, but I did notice after that my hands became very warm when I would touch someone, even just for a moment. I did not know what to make of any of this, really. I shared it a little bit with some people, but not very much, because it was more like, who's this crazy person? And I knew that it happened, but the only references I had for things like that were in science fiction. So, but I started to explore. There was no denying it. It was like my life was moving me in this direction, and there was no way to get out of it. And then at some point I chose into it, but my spiritual, my serious spiritual path started then, and it's been my life ever since. How I help people is I do counseling and healing. I work online mostly. A lot of people do videos these days, but I've been working on the phone and videos for like close to 16 years. So my daughter is 17 and a half. So when she was around 2, her mom was going back to work, and I decided to work from home on the phone instead of seeing people in person. And there's my website, so you can get in touch with me there. All my contact information is on there. In the menu, there's a way to make an appointment directly by clicking on schedule an appointment. And there's description of, more, there's testimonials there. There's specific descriptions about what I do. And my YouTube channel has lots of great videos talking about my work. There's a lot of tools on there, meditations, other self-care tools for clearing energy. There's a breathing exercise that I developed as part of my doctoral treatise. That's probably, all the tools on there are really quite amazing. I suggest doing them, definitely. I did have some very clear spiritual experiences before my near-death experience, and some of them, yes. The answer is yes. If I wonder if I was really paying attention and was on this path before, if I would have needed to have my skull cracked open, basically. So, but I do think it was that. So yes, there were things. I saw things, and I guess just my reference is so much that my being is so much that I didn't really think twice about it, but I ignored it and went back to work the next day. And so yes, it's hard. It's not easy to do this. It is not. I think being a man, it's even harder because we're brought up to not be sensitive, and this is a very caring, sensitive job, and I'd meditate every day. I do Tai Chi. I do a lot to take care of myself spiritually. Something that was very clear happened. I saw my grandfather in a movie theater a couple of years before that, who had passed away, and I was away at undergraduate school when he passed away, so he came back and I saw him. He was a unique looking guy. It's no way it wasn't him, and so that, and it's funny, I just sort of shrugged it off and went about my business, didn't. And there were other things, like sometimes I would know things about people or see little beings, that I would see once in a while. Now I see that stuff all the time because I've tuned into it and I trained myself to do that. But yes, I had many things happen that if I was listening and paying attention and doing what I was supposed to be doing, like I am now, it's very possible I wouldn't need to bang on my head. Yeah, well, I knew it was him. He was a very big guy, like 6'4", like 300 pounds, and he always wore a really nice suit and cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And this was in New York City, and nowadays it wouldn't be that unusual to wear that clothes, but back then it wasn't. People definitely in the East were not wearing that kind of clothes. But he still comes visit me from time to time. He was a very abundant man, and it's funny because I was just thinking of it. He would buy a new car like every 3 years, or even less. And people would say, kind of, when the ashtray got dirty, he would buy a new car. And he didn't smoke, but people were joking around, and it just shows. It was before there were leases, so he was kind of making his own lease by buying a new car every however often he would do that. Just a very loving, generous man that was, one of the light beacons in my family. That was great. So he comes around, when I want to try to manifest more abundance, he's always there to help me out. It's nice. The actual near-death experience was I'm a very kinesthetic person now. It's like how things feel to me is really my primary information input, intake. Just an example, like if I park my car somewhere, I have to remember to look to see where it is, because there's something about how it feels, and even so I have to remember to, a lot of people, their primary sense is visual. So for me, it's feeling. So my near-death experience was very feeling, and it was the part of knowing everything or being part of everything is hard to describe. And I start to do that. Part of me wants to go there. And so now I can connect into that when I'm working with people and see all sorts of interesting things about them, what's going on in their life now, what happened perhaps in their childhood from other lifetimes, and ways for them to unfold into their health and well-being and abundance and things like that. I didn't have anything scary. It was all just the most loving, wonderful thing. I was in the white light. It was just that. And like I said, the feeling part was really where it was at. It was definitely dark where my body was and the car was, and here it was just all light. It was separate, and sometimes try to find an image that would match the feeling, and there is I start to see something sometimes, and but I don't remember seeing that there. And I mean, now that you're asking me, I'm wondering if it, I also have a feeling I didn't digest mentally all that happened, because I really had no idea what to say or what happened, how to explain it at all. So in one way, the way that we see things in the highest levels of spirit are just there really for us, kind of to keep us occupied. And there is just not that much there. So when you're asking about that, so there was this image I found that I kind of did a Adobe Photoshop with, of this like big home in a forest somewhere that really matched up to my feeling, and I put all these colors in it, and I'm seeing that now and feeling stuff moving. So when I'm working with people and that happens, that movement is what I'm looking for, and that movement for me is what I'm looking for. So one thing the Sufi Sheikh would say a lot, you don't need to know that. So I'd ask him questions and he wouldn't answer me, and he would say, you don't need to know that. So I don't know if the healing and the spiritual unfoldment is what's important. But I'm feeling a lot of movement now, so something kind of cool is happening, and then part of the process is just wait and allow the movement to happen without trying to label it, because probably somewhere at the end of that movement is some really wonderful, wise, amazing information. That energy that I tapped into during my near-death experience, I have basically dedicated my life to increasing my ability to hold that energy and be connected to it, and go to higher and higher levels. So generally what I do is I can hold that energy there for people. When I work with people, almost always there's negative energy around them. Then there are also negative beings in spirit that are affecting them. Those things I can get rid of. There's a lot of times, I might have said earlier, there's things from earlier in life. There's things from other lifetimes. And I can check hundreds of, or if not thousands of different things. Usually my intuition will know, I need to go check the chakras or acupuncture points, or there could be, sometimes there's witchcraft or demons affecting people, entities, things like that, and then I focus on those things. Then there's also their path that I can see, and some of it is basically that you need to just keep taking those steps. So a lot of it is clearing and balancing the person's energy in their body. And I mean, really remarkable things happen. So. Something that happened after my near-death experience, I was living in Colorado. My mom convinced me and bribed me by buying me a new Jeep to come back east and work at my dad's electrical contracting company. And I was sitting in my apartment and someone knocked on the door. And I wasn't surprised at all, because it was before cell phones, so people just would show up without any warning. And I opened the door, and she told me she was a sister of a friend of mine from Colorado who I had mentioned my near-death experience to. And she said, I heard some interesting things about you. And she started talking to me about all this spiritual stuff and introduced me to a Sufi Sheikh. That's a teacher in the Islamic religion, the metaphysical part of the Islamic religion. Just that she showed up without me doing anything or knowing she was coming was kind of cool. He would always say to me, I'm not his real teacher. And he would say, we'll find you a teacher. I never found out who we were. Now I realize it's probably beings in spirit that he was interacting with. But one time he was teaching this class on sacred geometry that I find very interesting, but the class was definitely above my head. And I'm very smart in math, but there were these incredibly intelligent people in the class. And he said, you could come you're not going to understand anything, because I didn't really know the basics of it, and this was kind of an advanced class. So I would, I'd sweep the floor, clean up after him, do those menial things just to be around him and get some of his energy and any wisdom I could pick up. And during one of the breaks, he said, and he was a real jokester, he said, "Come into my office." It was in St. Patrick's Cathedral in Manhattan, and there was a room and a little room off to the side. The room was where the class was, and so we went into the side room off to the side, and he said, "Here, give me your hands," and he held my hands, and he said, "There, you got it." I go, "What? What are you talking about?" And then he said, "Up, give me your hands again." He goes, "No." He goes, "Now, there you have it." So he squeezed my hands, and after that, my hands became even warmer when I touch people, and so somehow he transmitted some spiritual growth and initiation for me that took my whole near-death experiencing to a whole new level. That was really cool. Well, if you look, I still have a scar that goes all the way back here. I mean, I lived. I think part of it was the spiritual part, but I do remember after my parents were there and the neurologists were there, we were kind of standing in a circle, and he was telling my parents what happened and some of the medical stuff, although not that much. And he looked at me and said, "You're lucky." And he had this smile on his face like he did this miraculous job, which he did, because my dad had come in while I was on the table or whatever in the hospital, and he saw, my head kind of open, and he could see inside, and so yes, some of it is the spiritual miracle that I lived, and some of it is, my body's resilient, and the doctor did a good job, but I guess those are all connected. Yeah, there's just miracles all the time, and, I mean, I get to experience really amazing things, so I can see, with people what's blocking them from having what they want in relationships, in their health, and know how to clear that. And almost always, and I say almost, but always, the process of healing starts when I start to work with someone. Sometimes there are things that happen instantaneously, like sometimes I see things and clear that, and the person goes, "Oh, I'm better." More times than not, though, it takes a series of sessions to get to that place of healing. So there is, but really embrace your gifts, whatever they are, from carpentry. I mean, I know how to do electrical work, I know how to cook, and I just love these things, and these are an expression of spirit. Meditate, journal writing, those two things are a must for spiritual journey. Well, God's love is everywhere, and if you can live life looking for that the best you can. Obviously, it's hard when there's people that are not nice to you, or, doing things you consider wrong, but even in those people, God's love is there.